It was supposed to be a next-level weapon, boasting extraordinary and unprecedented battlefield capabilities. It was meant to usher in a whole new era of warfare, making traditional tanks and infantry fighting vehicles utterly obsolete in the most dangerous combat zones. Instead, Russia's Uran-9 robot tank has turned out to be a complete disaster, leaving Vladimir Putin humiliated, along with everyone else in Russia who hyped up this abject failure of a project. Before we get to how and why this project failed so spectacularly, here's a look at how it all began. Work on the Uran-9 started in 2015. Several companies have handled its design and development, including JSC 766 UPTK and JSC Kalashnikov concern, with the state-owned Rostec defense conglomerate overseeing the project from its inception through to the present day. It was designed as a tracked unmanned combat ground vehicle, or UCGV. In simpler terms, it's a robot tank capable of operating without any onboard human crew. Many military forces around the world are working on UCGV projects, creating robotic tanks and armored vehicles that can be operated remotely, entering contested territory and engaging enemy forces without actually putting any of their own troops at risk. In the future, analysts expect that robots like these may make up a large part of major military forces, and entire battles could be carried out between robots from both sides, without the need for traditional troop warfare. Russia seemingly hoped to gain a significant head start on the rest of the world when it unveiled the Uran-9 in late 2016, and the multi-million-dollar military program was promoted far and wide, praised by Putin himself and sold as the next generation of military technology. Boris Simakin, head of the Analysis and Long-Term Planning Department at the state-owned Defense Import and Export Agency Rosoboronexport, said at the time, "Russian developers possess all the necessary competencies to create modern military robotics that will be in demand on the international market. This is a fast-growing segment of the arms industry, so Rosoboronexport will develop and implement a long-term marketing strategy to promote such systems, including as part of integrated security projects." Military promoters also hyped up the Uran-9's impressive array of equipment. It was fitted out with a 30mm 2A72 automatic cannon, a coaxial 7.62mm machine gun, and Ataka anti-tank guided missiles with a flexible weapon configuration that could be easily modified in the future to suit different missions and needs. Uran-9s also came equipped with laser warning systems, plus target detection, identification, and tracking technology that was said to be state-of-the-art, allowing these robotic tanks to identify and engage enemy forces on the battlefield with speed and efficiency. According to the developers, the Uran-9 was able to provide remote reconnaissance and fire support for combined arms, recon, and counter-terrorism units, and its use on the battlefield could massively minimize personnel casualties and losses. Other technical specifications, too, were encouraging. According to official documents, the Uran-9 measured up at more than 16 feet, 5 meters, and weighed in at 12 tons. It could reach peak speeds of 22 miles per hour on roads and 15 miles per hour off-road, boasting strong enough armor to withstand shell splinters and small arms fire. It also had limited autonomous capabilities, so even if the signal between the tank and its teleoperator was temporarily cut, disrupted, or interrupted, the tank could still find its way out of a difficult or dangerous situation. On paper, it sounded quite extraordinary, a powerful, intelligent, and highly capable robotic tank ready to change the face of war as we know it. What's more, this wasn't just a conceptual or hypothetical vehicle. Development moved quick, and the TASS Russian news agency reported that Russian forces would receive 20 Uran-9 unmanned combat ground vehicles by the end of 2016. Until the end of this year, 5 sets of the Uran-9 multipurpose combat robotic complex will be delivered to the troops. Each set includes 4 combat vehicles configured for reconnaissance or fire support, a mobile command vehicle, and 2 transporters. Only a year later, the first international interest emerged in the Uran-9, with officials from the Myanmar army visiting Russia for live demonstrations of the Uran-9 and other unmanned ground platforms, like the Uran-6 mine-clearing system and the Uran-14 multipurpose UGV. According to reports, Myanmar showed great interest in potentially acquiring some of these vehicles, and it was expected that it might be the first of many nations to invest in Russia's robotic army, with other countries including Saudi Arabia, India, Serbia, and the United Arab Emirates all approached for potential export deals. But then things started to go very, very wrong. In 2018, the Uran-9 was finally put to the test in a series of combat trials in Syria during the Syrian civil war. Given all the hype and promotion the vehicle had enjoyed prior to this point, analysts expected to hear glowing reports of the Uran-9's battlefield successes. Instead, the combat trials exposed a whole host of weaknesses in the system, as detailed in a damning report by AP Anisimov, a senior research officer at the 3rd Central Research Institute of the Russian Defense. Speaking at the 10th All-Russian Scientific Conference, Actual Problems of Protection and Security, which was held in April 2018 at a naval academy in St. Petersburg, Anisimov didn't hold back in his criticisms, revealing the full extent of the Uran-9's failures. First, the report noted that in urban areas with low-rise buildings, the Uran-9's control range was drastically reduced. Operators could only communicate with the tank at distances of 300 to 500 meters, 550 yards. Beyond that range, the signal could cut out entirely. That, in a nutshell, means that the Uran-9 is utterly unsuitable for deployment in urban areas, despite promoters originally saying the exact opposite, because operators would constantly have to relocate in order to avoid falling out of range. The report also detailed multiple instances of complete control loss, with 17 instances of short-term loss of control, lasting up to a minute, and 2 cases of long-term loss of control, in which the connection between the operator and the tank was cut for up to 1.5 hours in total. Again, this tells us that far from being a reliable robotic tank with a secure and stable connection to its operating team, the Uran-9 is instead entirely unreliable. And in real-world combat situations, armies cannot make meaningful progress or hope to succeed on the battlefield with weapons and systems that are prone to failing and letting them down at any time without warning. It might not have been all that bad if communication problems were the only issues detected in the Uran-9 during its time in Syria, but they weren't. Its designers apparently couldn't even get the most basic elements correct, as the report also revealed that core pieces of the Uran-9's running gear, including support and guide rollers, as well as the suspension springs that allow the tank to move safely and efficiently from place to place, simply weren't good enough. As a result, the report concluded, the robot's chassis is unsuitable for prolonged ground combat and requires frequent field repairs. In the heat of battle, with fire raining down from different directions, where split-second decisions can be the difference between life and death, soldiers don't want to waste time and resources and put their own lives on the line to fix a broken-down robot or bring a failing system back online. It gets worse. Some of the core features and selling points of the Uran-9 are its reconnaissance capabilities. It was supposed to be able to use industry-leading electro-optical technologies to spot, identify, and track targets, even those that were relatively far away. In reality, that all proved to be a lie. Combat tests of the vehicle's recon abilities uncovered multiple issues, including the fact that the electro-optical system only worked for spotting targets at ranges of up to 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles, and the OCH-4 optical station was completely incapable of detecting enemy observation or targeting devices that were supposed to be within its detection range. What's more, the system often generated false signals, incorrectly labeling objects on the ground or in the air as enemy targets. So not only was the Uran-9 breaking down all the time and losing connection with its operators on a regular basis, but it couldn't even reliably do what it's programmed to do, detect enemy targets on the battlefield. Unfortunately for the robot tank's design team, Anisimov's ruthless report still wasn't finished. He went on to reveal that there had also been multiple instances of the Uran-9's weapon systems failing to function correctly. To be more precise, the 30mm 2A72 automatic cannon experienced 6 instances of delays, plus 1 instance of total failure. Again, this simply cannot work in real-world battlefield situations. No army in the world would want to deploy a tank or vehicle with weapons that simply might seize up or stop functioning at any moment. On top of all that, the report uncovered a glaring design flaw in the Uran-9. It's only capable of firing from a stationary position. All of its weapons, sighting systems, and sensors lack any sort of stabilization technology, so it cannot accurately fire on targets while moving. These days, the vast majority of modern battle tanks have stabilization, so they're able to move and fire at the same time, and it's considered quite outdated if a piece of armor has to come to a complete stop every time it wants to attack something. Especially in this modern age of drone warfare, with unmanned aerial vehicles buzzing through the skies and easily able to strike at the weak points of stationary targets, vehicles that are constantly stopping and starting have little chance of long-term survival. In the end, Anisimov's assessment was clear. He concluded that Russian combat UGVs like the Uran-9 were not yet capable of carrying out their assigned tasks in conventional combat situations. Put more simply, he said the tank was nowhere near close to being ready for real-world warfare. In the wake of such heavy criticism, the Russian military tried to put on a brave face. They continued to offer the Uran-9 around for export to various countries and even attempted to sweeten the deal with Myanmar by offering them a so-called partner discount and have the option to trade some older T-34 tanks for new Uran-9 units. In the end, however, having evaluated the robot's performance, Myanmar made the call to reject Russia's offer. Still, the Kremlin had already spent so much money, time, and resources on this project. It wasn't prepared to simply throw in the towel and admit that it had made a massive mistake. It also, seemingly, was not ready to spend more money and additional years of development perfecting the product and fixing its numerous flaws. Instead, in 2019, the Russian Ministry of Defense made the quite bizarre decision to officially accept the Uran-9 into service. In an interview with the state-owned TASS agency, the Kalashnikov CEO Vladimir Dmitriev stated, "We are currently completing the production of the first series batch. The Uran has good scientific and technological potential for developing further products." Dmitriev also claimed that the Syrian combat trials had helped the company identify areas to improve the robot tank's design before beginning mass production, with insider sources from the defense industry stating that engineers were working on improving the unit's range, response times, and data transmission capabilities. However, it seems that this was simply another case of Russian officials using lies and falsehoods to cover up their failures, as another detailed report on the capacities of the Uran-9 soon followed. This time the assessment came from a company outside of Russia, BAE Systems, which is the largest defense company in Great Britain. The company had been researching unmanned ground vehicles and autonomous systems to assess their current capabilities and potential effectiveness in conventional combat situations, with one section focusing specifically on the Uran-9. Unfortunately for Russia, this report highlighted many of the exact same shortcomings that Anisimov had detailed previously, coming to the same final conclusions too. BAE Systems stated in no uncertain terms that the Uran-9 was not able to perform the assigned tasks in the classical types of combat situations. It noted numerous flaws in the vehicle's design and deployment, such as the fact that its sensors and optical systems were unable to identify enemy targets more than 1.25 miles away. It added that the sensors and weapon systems were, in a word, useless, while the vehicle was in motion due to a lack of stabilization in the design. The report also highlighted significant delays between fire commands being issued and executed, going on to call the Uran-9 unreliable on the whole, as well as susceptible to electronic warfare systems and sudden loss of communications or control. Summing up its findings, the report authors stated that it would take another 10 to 15 years before UGVs like this one will be ready to take on the kinds of complex tasks they were designed for. Thus, in both external and internal assessments, the Uran-9 was not only found wanting, it was deemed entirely unreliable and ineffective in almost every possible way. Whether you're looking at the communications and control systems, the sensors needed to spot targets, the weapon systems, or even the rollers and suspension systems that allow the tank to move from place to place, every core aspect of its design can either be classed as flawed or a total failure. Despite all of this, the Kremlin still hasn't openly admitted that the program needs work or that mistakes were made. As always, it stubbornly and childishly refuses to accept it got something wrong and wasted literally billions of rubles over the past decade on the project, preferring instead to spread lies and twist the truth to suit its agenda. But it can't cover up the fact that despite trying to market the Uran-9 to multiple nations across the Middle East and Asia, there are still no official, confirmed investors in these vehicles anywhere in the world. The Kremlin also cannot hide the unfortunate reality that since it began its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, there have been 0 verified combat uses of the Uran-9 so far. If this vehicle was as good as the Kremlin claims, if it was truly capable of all its developers say, then surely it would be out there right now, rolling along the front lines in Donetsk and Luhansk, spearheading the charge towards towns and cities that have proven almost impossible for Russian forces to capture for many months, like Pokrovsk. Instead, the Uran-9 is notable only for its absence. Just like numerous other vehicles and innovations that the Russian military has hyped up over the years, it's nowhere to be seen when the country is embroiled in an actual war. Instead, we see Russia resorting to the most desperate tactics, like dragging rusty, ancient tanks out of storage facilities and rolling them into battle, or transforming old Soviet missile platforms into personnel carriers in order to compensate for its colossal losses and maintain any sort of pressure along the front lines. As far as robotics go, Russian units on the ground haven't been able to rely on systems like the Uran-9 being deployed to support them or save their lives. Instead, they've had to make do with only the most basic, improvised ground robots, often built by amateur enthusiasts and volunteer engineers and designed for specific niche roles, rather than game-changing combat capacities. Examples include the lightweight Courier unmanned ground vehicle, which started life as a garage-based prototype but has since been adopted and upgraded by the Russian military. Capable of carrying various sorts of weaponry, including automatic grenade launchers, RPGs, and anti-tank missiles, as well as heavy machine guns, the Courier is a reasonably versatile addition to the Russian arsenal, but it's still far from fulfilling the game-changing promises that the Uran-9 was supposed to introduce when it first entered service several years ago. All in all, the Uran-9 project on the whole is yet another expensive and wasteful example of Russia overpromising but under-delivering. In its early stages, Putin himself made the mistake of praising the vehicle's design, while former Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu proudly showed off the technology at military demonstrations. They likely envisioned a near-future scenario in which Russia led the world in robotic warfare, with military investors lining up to place their orders and Uran-9s dominating battlefields around the globe. Instead, what they got was a complete flop, a case study in failure, as Defense Blog so succinctly sums it up. The only question now is whether Russia actually decides to learn from this disaster faster so that it can potentially work to improve some of the fundamental issues with the Uran-9's design and perhaps eventually create a worthwhile UGV. However, this certainly isn't the first time we've seen Russia hype up one of its military creations, only for the project to fall flat when the chips were down. And it likely won't be the last either, as the Kremlin so often repeats the same mistakes again and again. You can watch this video, for example, to see how Russian T-90M tanks, which were once called the best in the world by Kremlin officials, didn't even survive a single day on the battlefields of Ukraine. Or check out this in-depth breakdown of the Russian nuclear-powered battlecruiser Admiral Nakhimov, which returned to service after a near 30-year layoff, despite major safety issues and even the risk of triggering another Chernobyl-like disaster. Make sure to subscribe to our channel too, so you can stay in the know and up to date on all of the most significant stories from the Russia-Ukraine war, including frontline clashes, peace talk prospects, and new weapon rollouts. And thank you as always for watching.